welcome to the Double Dribble podcast off-season recap number 2 with Jacob and Ray.
Yes, today we'll be looking into the number 15th seed in the West, the Houston Rockets. A bit more interesting than our last one, Orlando.
So they have a lot of decisions to make with people like John Wall
and
what they do in the draft.
Obviously, a bit of confusion there because in our last one, with Orlando, we thought it was pretty much a guarantee that Chet Holmgren would go first to Orlando, but then we checked the mock drafts just before this, and Chet was going to the Thunder with pick 2.
Yeah, it's just kind of whatever.
But
there's a lot of different mock drafts and a lot of them have different information. But the top 3 is the top 3.
Yeah, but it's looking pretty good that Paolo Banchero goes and plays for Houston with pick 3.
I reckon this is a pretty good draft for the Rockets. Like we're talking about with the Magic, how they need a bit of front court depth. Yeah, because you've got like Jalen Green, who's a guard, and you've got basically, Paolo Banchero, Chet Holmgren.
What position is Paolo Banchero? I'm sorry.
4, I think. 4.
Yeah.
Small 5 is like
Obviously,
6'10".
they've got Christian Wood still.
Yeah, but then you've got Banchero and, Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren, who are all 4s and 5s.
Yeah.
So it fits pretty well for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're basically left with whoever the Magic and Thunder don't take.
Yeah, and it's looking like Paolo Banchero is the guy that will be taken because Paolo Banchero, he's a freshman, still in college.
Yeah, so that's his stats didn't stand out as much, averaging 17, 8 and 3. But I reckon you look at it, and he's shooting around 50% from the field, around 35% from 3, and you can see the talent. Yeah. I was watching a couple games because they got knocked out in the Final Four, and I was watching that game, and you can see he's around there, he had 20, 10, 2 assists and 2 blocks. They were he was in the action, and you could see that he had potential just from watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that he's the kind of guy that Houston would like. Obviously, to partner up with Jalen Green. I'm not really sure if that's their goal, to be their big 2.
Yeah.
Or if they want to do one more season.
I still think they'll be a lottery team next year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that they're not... they're a 10th seed play-in team at best.
Yeah.
At absolute best. But I think there's too many teams on the rise for that.
Especially in the West.
Yeah.
Also, in next year's mock drafts, it's a pretty stacked top with, people like Victor Wembanyama, who's a 7-3 shooter that blocks shots. So I think a lot of people are going after Adam Scooter Henderson, who's also comparisons prime Westbrook. So
obviously, as I'm not going to say bad, but as underwhelming as Westbrook is right now,
prime Westbrook was
still he's averaged a triple-double.
Not just a triple-double, it was a 30-point triple-double?
Yeah. It's just absurd.
Yeah, so that looks like it could be a tank-off for the top 2.
Tank-off. That is not a term that I'd like to be using, but it's a term that I'm using.
Yeah.
Tank-off.
Yeah, so they'll probably be in that hunt for a top pick again, and then from there, if they say they do get one of those 2, then you're in a sort of big 2, big 3 sort of situation where you can then grow together and you can get to where you want.
And you can also, you remind yourself, they've also got Kenyon Martin.
Yeah.
And they've got Kevin Porter.
Yeah, they've got a lot of quite a lot of young players.
This team has potential, especially with this number 3
Şengün,
pick.
our friend Şengün.
Yep. What do you go, 13th last year?
Yeah.
Interesting things going on around the draft for them, but moving on to their
free agency and roster makeup. So they've got a couple important situations here. They've got Jason Tate, who's they'll accept his team option, and then you've got somebody like Dennis Schroeder, Bruno Fernando, who are both not as bigger players that they'll probably re-sign. But the biggest one is John Wall, who will accept his player option.
You would imagine.
Yeah. So, depends what happens. They could try get a draft pick and go for this has been sort of around, these sort of trade rumours with John Wall for Westbrook and a first, because Westbrook is, or something like that. Come
on, none of the teams are doing that.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I think something like that.
John Wall is almost just
But he's not going to play is the thing, so they could have some buyout, which, if you don't know, a buyout's kind of like when you
pay the player
to leave your team and then they can be picked up. So that might be in the works, because I think John Wall would agree to a buyout because he wants to play basketball and he's not going to play basketball with Houston.
He's been benched. So I think that being in the NBA, if you get rid of all the politics, everything, and you just... all these players, all they've ever done is they just want to play basketball. And right now, John Wall, he's not doing that. And so I think Houston should definitely look into it, because it also gives them a lot more cap room and a bit more space to move.
Yeah, definitely.
So John Wall, he's an interesting piece in this off-season. But like Westbrook, nobody wants him. If you release John Wall to free agency, who's picking him up and actually playing him?
I reckon they'd pick him up. Teams would pick him up, but not on a $47 million contract.
Well, no, that's pretty obvious. I think I'd rather take TJ McConnell over John Wall at this point. John Wall's, I think he's pretty much washed. So,
which is kind of sad to see, because where he was dominating, he was a great player, and then injuries.
Top 5 point guard in his best. And then he got himself injured, and now he finds himself in a bit of a dire situation when nobody wants him.
Yeah, so I think they have around $6 or $7 million in cap room with John Wall's $47 million. So if they were to pay, I don't know how much of I'm not an expert on buyouts, but if they were to pay him $30 million, then that would clear up an extra $15 million of cap space.
Yeah, and then add that on, they got about $22 million which you could spend on.
Yeah, which would then give you about $20 to $25 million, which then you can try sign some younger player who hasn't really had the opportunity. I reckon sort of somebody like Jonathan Kuminga, but a couple years older.
Well,
if he's still on the bench, then somebody who's you can see potential but hasn't really had the opportunity.
I think that I don't want to turn this conversation into a Jonathan Kuminga Golden State conversation, but I think Jonathan Kuminga he will get a run.
Yeah.
Because Andrew Wiggins is still pretty young.
Yeah.
But then Draymond's not.
And you can
Clay's not.
Yeah, they've been running with the death lineup. Wiggins has been playing the 4. And he's not
you
small.
can imagine 6 years in advance, let's say the core 3 have retired. So Draymond, Clay and Steph. I don't think they will be retired in 6 years, but let's just say they are.
They'll be on their final leg.
Then you've got Paul, some other guard, Wiggins, Kuminga,
And Wiseman.
If Wiseman comes back.
That's
So I think your example of Kuminga is, I don't agree with it.
Or I'm just talking about like
a young player that needs an opportunity.
Yeah, say Kuminga is like 2 years older on the last year of his contract.
Yeah.
Then that sort of player that's been on the bench.
Maybe. I mean, yeah. So it's Houston. All these bottom end teams, they all have these weird roadblocks.
Because nobody
they just can't get anywhere.
Yeah, because nobody really wants to go to Houston. Like if they're probably going to be tanking next, or not tanking, but they're going to be in the lottery.
Like they need to find a way. They either have to do it out of the draft, or they have to get a lot of assets, and they need to trade for a star.
Or they have to just make sort of like what the Warriors have done, make smart moves like D'Angelo Russell for Andrew Wiggins and a pick. Andrew Wiggins is a really good player. That pick turned into Kuminga.
It really, when you think about it, it's for any other team, it feels like a stupid trade. Because Andrew Wiggins, he's a good player, but he went number 1, so he's a bit of a bust.
Yeah, so they've basically traded D'Angelo Russell for an all-star and Jonathan Kuminga.
So, smart moves like that, they knew that they could make Andrew Wiggins what they wanted, and now Andrew Wiggins is playing the best defense possible against Luka.
Yeah.
Because obviously Luka's just kind of impossible to guard, but he's literally playing some of the best defense on Luka right now, for the Warriors. And in Minnesota, he wasn't trying.
Yeah.
And now the Warriors have turned into someone who tries his absolute hardest, and I think that's something that Houston and Orlando have to do, or they have to turn himself into the Heat.
Yeah, where they've just
pick up Max Strus and Gabe Vincent.
Where they've taken a heap of undrafted players and just turned them into
what they want.
Yeah, with also they've been good for so many years without being bad and being in the lottery.
Absolutely. So I think that there are avenues out of this, and that they will take one eventually. We're not going to see the Warriors and the Bucks and the Celtics and the Heat at the top of the list of the standings every year for 20 years. Like, eventually Houston will make their way back up there.
Yeah.
It's just how they choose to do that. Do they do it through the draft? Do they do it through trying to, play Heat style? Or do they do it through...
doing being like the Warriors and just making these
small,
like what seems like a small move that turns out to be massive, and like that could be trading for a first round pick that turns into the next like one of the best players in the league.
Or it could be trading for Kenrich Williams, but then Kenrich Williams in a couple of months gets flipped with someone else for I don't know, OG Anunoby, and all of a sudden you have a great player on your hands.
Or it could be like drafting Jokic in the second round, or drafting Giannis with like the 14th or 15th pick.
So there's avenues out of this, and we've seen teams get out of it, like
Philadelphia.
Yeah, and
trust
I think
the process, and then
it's kind of like OKC. They've already done it.
Yeah, they've got their avenue out, and it's just about not.
They're already out. All they have to do is just not screw it. For teams like Orlando and Houston,
it's a lot harder.
They have not quite found their way out.
Yeah, so they've got contract wise, they don't have a lot. So for the year after next, they have 9 players with a total of $50 million in salary. So they don't have John Wall if he stays on the team. They don't have Christian Wood. Kevin Porter's a restricted free agent, and Sean Tate's a restricted free agent. And also Eric Gordon's contract, which is around $20 million, has 2 more years left. So they'll be looking to...
Houston have just got themselves stuck in a bunch of bad contracts.
Yeah. So in a few years, I reckon they'll be primed for around 2024, because they'll have a lot of like the big contracts off the books. They'll still have Jalen Green on a rookie contract.
Whoever they take this year
will still be on a rookie contract. Probably whoever they take next year, which will be in the lottery, will still be on their rookie contract. And then that you could say, like, then you could end up getting free agents.
So I think that's...
Smaller level free agents to say, look at our future. Like...
I think that's just what they're doing right now, just playing the waiting game. I think they're telling Jalen Green, just hang in there for 2 years. Because obviously Jalen Green,
wants to win.
I reckon he's the best player on this team already.
Yeah, agreed.
And he's only in his second year, which really shouldn't be the way it goes, but, like, it is.
And also, like, as a first-year player, your will to win would be so, like... Yeah, you would want to win everything. So it would be hard being, like... It would be hard a lot of the time as most rookies, like top-level rookies, who are on bad teams that have been in the lottery and they're losing. But you've just got to make sure he's there and tell him, hang in there.
Absolutely.
Because we have
draft picks. And
we'll have, like, one of the top 3, then you have pick next year.
And then, all of a sudden, 2 years' time, you might be able to make a bit of a splash in free agency. And then, all of a sudden, your team is looking pretty damn good. So, and I reckon the last part of free agency is, trades.
Yeah.
What do they do? Like,
do you try get rid of Eric Gordon's contract? $20 million.
Are you just gonna look for or, like, what's the goal to get rid of Eric Gordon?
Are you just gonna? I reckon. I don't know. Would you try get a younger player, like might be in their second year, that you can see has, or you think has potential? Yeah, somebody.
Like, I don't know, maybe Chris Duarte?
Yeah, somebody like that, and maybe like a second on top of that.
Yeah. Just get rid of Eric Gordon's contract and bring in someone that
who's young and can grow with the team. And
absolutely. Like, Chris Duarte, he could... I'm pretty sure he could end up being a very good shooter.
Yep.
So, there's options. But, as we said, I think they're just gonna... I think they've... As most teams do, they've locked onto the draft their way out of a slump.
Yeah.
Draft their way out of a bad situation. And they've pretty much locked onto that. So,
yeah. I reckon somebody, well, just looking at now, like Ayo Dosunmu, or he's probably might be too valuable for the Bulls.
The Bulls like him. Bulls actually played him a lot for a second round pick.
Yeah, there's a lot of options they can have.
There's a lot of people, even late first rounders.
Yeah, but just, they're most likely going to do what most teams do and go through the draft and try to deal from there.
So I think in terms of trades, if they do one...
It'll be a cap, like get rid of cap.
Yeah, it's not going to be anything huge. It's not going to be like, oh, this guy could totally turn this team around.
Yeah, and that's also not what they're looking for.
No.
Because then they get somebody who's on, like, could turn this team around to like an 8 seed, but then they're just probably going to be stuck around that 8-9 seed for a long time.
Like what Indiana kind of did, where they were just stuck in a position where they're not in a high lottery, and
they're not in the playoffs.
Even, and if they are, they're not competitive at all.
Yeah.
So, like for instance,
I reckon sort of like a Trailblazers sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where they've kind of been, they haven't had high picks, but they've been a first, second round playoff team.
Yeah. How often have you How often have you heard Indiana? There's talked about none. Same as Sacramento. You just forget about them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Houston can't afford to go because no one's going to Indiana.
Yeah.
And Indiana haven't really been anywhere since Paul George.
Yeah.
In like 2011. Or something like that.
They just need to avoid kind of becoming the forgotten team. It's kind of like mediocre just for...
And also
like
right
10
now,
years.
like I can still remember when it was Houston versus Golden State.
Yeah.
For the finals, and they just kept losing for different reasons.
Yeah.
And James Harden and Westbrook, Chris Paul, and Harden, you remember that version of the Rockets, and it's like, they were really good.
That was only 2 years ago. Or, James Harden got traded last season?
Yeah. Last offseason to,
the Nets.
Yeah.
So that was 2 years ago. James Harden was averaging 30 a game.
Yep. And so everything's gone downhill very quickly for the Rockets, but I think, like OKC, everything can go uphill. Well, I guess that's not really what I'm trying to get at, but everything could start going up. And, I think they're the 15th seed, so they're not really going to get much worse.
Yeah, so I reckon that's what they should look at and go, well, with the picks we have, we can get higher and we can eventually get more pieces, and then we'll get to deep playoff runs in the future.
Absolutely. So Houston, they're an interesting team. Next up, I think, who's 14th in the East? It's, I can't remember these things because it's been the playoffs for a while now, and I just have not thought of any.
It is Oh, yeah, so we'll have one of the 14th seed probably in the East.
Yeah.
For the next
episode.
The West
14th seed is OKC, but we'll just keep going East, West, East, West, East,
yeah.
West. So it'll be the 14th seed in the East. I'm pretty sure it's Detroit.
Yeah, I think it's Detroit.
Yep,
Detroit, and then 14th seed is OKC, and then we'll keep going from there.
Yep, so
that'll be the next episode, so
catch you in
watch that. Yeah.
Subscribe, like if you want, I guess. It's up to you.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.